I never believed in cursed places. Old houses, sure. Abandoned hospitals, maybe. Forests where people disappeared. There was usually a logical explanation. But entire streets don't simply disappear. Or at least, they shouldn't. This happened in the fall of 2019. I had just started working as a freelance photographer, traveling across small towns in America, looking for forgotten places to document before they vanished forever. Old diners, closed theaters, historic churches. The quieter the town, the better. One evening, I stopped at a nearly empty gas station outside a tiny town in southern Missouri. The cashier was an older man watching baseball on a television that barely had reception. When he saw my camera bag, he smiled. "Looking for old buildings? That's the idea." He scratched his gray beard. "If you want something nobody's photographed," he pointed west, "find Ashwood." I opened Google Maps. Nothing. "No signal here," he said. "You'll find signs." "What's in Ashwood?" He hesitated longer than necessary. "Only one street." The drive should have taken 30 minutes. Instead, it took almost 2 hours. The road narrowed until there were no lane markings. Then the asphalt became cracked. Eventually, even the telephone poles disappeared. The forest pressed close on both sides. Around sunset, I saw the first sign, "Welcome to Ashwood." Population. The number had been scratched away. Someone had nailed a second board beneath it. It read only, "Please leave before dark." I smiled to myself. Tourist gimmick. Some small towns leaned into ghost stories to attract visitors. I drove on. Ashwood looked abandoned, not ruined, just paused. Every house stood intact. Lawns were neatly cut. Mailboxes remained upright. Curtains hung in every window. But there wasn't a single person outside. No dogs barking, no children, no cars moving. Nothing. The silence felt wrong. Even small towns make noise. A screen door slamming, a lawnmower, someone talking across the street. Ashwood had none of that. There was only one road, straight, perfectly level, about half a mile long. On one side stood 12 houses, on the other stood 13, exactly 25 homes. No intersections, no side streets, just one long stretch ending at another wall of trees. I parked beside what looked like an abandoned grocery store. Its windows were dusty. A faded sign above the entrance read, "Holloway's Market." The clock inside had stopped at 6:12. Every shelf was still stocked. Boxes of cereal, soup cans, glass bottles of soda. Nothing appeared disturbed, as though everyone had simply walked away yesterday. Outside the store stood an old bulletin board. Most notices had faded beyond recognition, except one, typed neatly, "Town meeting. Remember, if someone knocks after midnight, do not answer." Someone had torn off the bottom half. I spent the next hour photographing the town. Everything looked strangely untouched. Every bicycle remained parked. Every porch swing hung still.
Even one house had a pie cooling on the windowsill. Of course, it wasn't fresh, but it looked like nobody had bothered to move it. Time felt suspended. Around 6 o'clock, I finally met someone, an elderly woman watering flowers. She looked perfectly ordinary. Blue sweater, white hair, kind eyes. She smiled warmly. "You shouldn't still be here." "I was just leaving." She nodded. "Good." Then she asked something that caught me completely off guard. "You haven't heard knocking yet, have you?" I laughed. "No." "Good." She returned to watering her flowers. Conversation over. As I walked back towards my truck, I noticed something odd. The photographs on my camera, every picture looked normal, except one, house number 18. In reality, the porch had been empty, but in the photograph, someone stood behind the screen door, watching me. I looked back at the house. Nobody. I zoomed in to the image. The figure was blurry, tall, thin, face impossible to make out, but one detail stood out clearly: its hand, pressed flat against the glass, as if it had been waiting for me to notice. The sun disappeared behind the trees. Darkness came much faster than expected. Streetlights flickered on all at once. Warm yellow light spilled across the empty road. Then every front porch light turned on, one after another. 25 houses, without anyone touching a switch. I hurried towards my truck. The engine wouldn't start. The battery had been perfectly fine all day. Now, nothing, not even a click. I tried my phone. No signal, no GPS, no emergency calls. Only one notification appeared. There was no sender, no number, just 3 words: "Don't answer it." That's when I heard the first knock. 3 slow taps, somewhere down the street. Not loud, just knock, knock, knock. Then silence. A few seconds later, the same 3 knocks came again, closer this time, but I couldn't tell from where. Every house remained dark behind its curtains. Every porch stood empty. The sound echoed along the street as if the entire town were listening. Then, from somewhere just behind me, a calm voice whispered, "It only knocks 3 times the first night." I spun around so fast that I nearly dropped my camera. Nobody. The road behind me was empty. The grocery store stood exactly where it had been a second earlier, its dusty windows reflecting the glow of the streetlights. My truck remained parked beside it, lifeless, the dashboard dark. Yet I knew someone had spoken. The voice hadn't sounded threatening. If anything, it sounded exhausted, like someone who had repeated the same warning for years. Then came the knocking again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it echoed from the opposite end of the street. I couldn't tell whether it was growing closer or simply moving. The sound bounced strangely between the houses. Every porch light remained on. Every curtain stayed closed. No one looked outside. It felt as though the entire town had agreed to ignore it. A porch light flickered across the street. An elderly man stepped outside carrying a lantern. He He looked at me for only a second before motioning me to come over. Not waving, just one slow gesture, as if speaking would be dangerous. I crossed the street without thinking. The knocking stopped the moment I reached his porch. He opened the door only wide enough for me to slip inside, then he locked it immediately. 3 locks, 1 chain, and finally a thick wooden beam that dropped into metal brackets across the door. Only after everything was secured did he turn toward me. "You stayed too late. I couldn't start my truck. It never starts after sunset." "What is that knocking?" He looked away. "You'll hear it every night." His house smelled of old wood and coffee. Everything inside looked ordinary. Family photographs lined the walls. A grandfather clock ticked softly in the corner. A baseball game played silently on an old television. Normal, almost comforting, except every window had been covered from the inside with heavy blankets. Not curtains, blankets. No light escaped, no light entered. The old man poured 2 cups of coffee. He pushed one toward me. "You've already looked outside after dark." "Yeah," he sighed. "Then it knows you're here." "What knows?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened a faded notebook lying on the kitchen table. Every page contained dates, names, short notes. Some had check marks, others ended with a single word: "Gone." "My father kept this," he said quietly. "Then I did." He slid the notebook toward me. The earliest entry was dated 1958, another from 1976, another from 1998, the most recent, October 14th, 2022. The note next to it read, "Tourist, photographer, didn't listen." A chill crept up my spine. "I'm a photographer." He knew. "You've seen this happen before?" He nodded. "Too many times." The knocking returned. This time it came directly from the front porch. 3 slow taps. The old man didn't even look at the door. Instead, he stared at the kitchen clock. 11:43 p.m. It always starts before midnight. The knocking came again, slightly louder. Knock, knock, knock. Something brushed gently across the front window, not scratching, more like fingertips sliding slowly over the glass. What happens if someone answers? The old man's face turned pale. "No one here has answered in 23 years. So you don't know." "Oh, we know." He looked toward a family photograph hanging on the wall. A smiling woman, 2 young boys. Only the old man remained alive in the room. My wife answered. Silence settled between us. I never saw her again. Midnight arrived. The grandfather clock chimed 12 slow notes. The knocking stopped for almost an entire minute. The silence felt even worse. Then someone tried the doorknob slowly, turning it left, then right, patiently, almost politely. The locks rattled, the wooden beam groaned slightly under the pressure. Whoever stood outside wasn't forcing the door. They were simply checking, making sure it was still locked. Then came a voice, a woman's voice, soft, gentle. "David." The old man's hands began shaking. I realized David was his name. The voice spoke again. "It's cold. I forgot my keys. I just need 1 minute." Tears formed in the old man's eyes. "That's my wife," he whispered, "but she's been dead for 23 years. The voice sounded heartbreakingly real, warm, familiar, patient. There was no anger, no growling, no monstrous tone, only someone asking to come home. Again, 3 knocks, then silence. An hour passed. The voice disappeared. Eventually, the old man stood. "It's moving." "How do you know?" "It visits every house, every night, every night. And if someone leaves," another long silence, "they never do." At 2:17 a.m., the power failed. The television clicked off. The lights disappeared. Only the lantern remained. Its small flame cast long shadows across the room. The old man froze. His breathing became shallow. "It doesn't usually come inside town." "What do you mean?" "It stays on the porches." The knocking echoed again. Not outside, inside the house, from somewhere upstairs, 1 floor above us. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. The old man stared toward the ceiling. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "It's never done that before." To be continued.
Neither of us moved. The 3 knocks above our heads echoed through the old house, followed by complete silence. The lantern flame trembled, though there wasn't a breath of wind. The old man, David, looked older than he had an hour earlier. Every wrinkle seemed deeper, every movement slower. Then another sound drifted down from the 2nd floor. Footsteps, soft, measured, walking from one end of the hallway to the other. Not searching, not rushing, simply pacing. David whispered, "Stay here." Before I could stop him, he picked up the lantern and climbed the stairs. I followed despite every instinct telling me not to. The 2nd floor consisted of 4 bedrooms connected by a narrow hallway. The footsteps had stopped. Every door stood open. Every room was empty. Beds neatly made, furniture covered with thin layers of dust. Nothing looked disturbed, nothing except 1 door at the very end of the hallway. It was closed, unlike all the others. David stared at it for several seconds. "I locked this room 23 years ago." His voice cracked. "I haven't opened it since." The brass doorknob turned slowly, on its own. The latch clicked. The door drifted inward with a long, tired creak. Inside, the room was empty. No furniture, no pictures, only a single rocking chair facing the window. The chair rocked gently, back and forth, even though the air inside the room was completely still.
Then I noticed something on the floor. Fresh footprints, bare feet. They began in the center of the room, not at the door, not at the window, just appearing from nowhere. They crossed the wooden floor, passed directly between us, continued into the hallway, and vanished. Neither of us had seen anyone leave. The lantern suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the room. For one endless second, I couldn't hear anything. Then, inches from my right ear, a calm voice whispered, "You're standing in my house." I stumbled backward, crashing into the hallway wall. David struck a match. The tiny flame filled the darkness. The room was empty again. The rocking chair had stopped moving. We hurried downstairs. The front door stood wide open. None of the locks were broken. The heavy wooden beam still rested in its brackets, yet somehow the door was open. Cold night air poured inside. David slammed it shut without saying a word. The first gray light of dawn finally crept over the trees. Almost instantly, the strange feeling disappeared. Birds began singing. The porch lights switched off together. Somewhere outside, a lawnmower started. A dog barked. It was as if the town had suddenly remembered how to be alive. My truck started on the first turn of the key. The battery sounded perfect. David handed me my camera before I left. "You should delete the pictures. I need them. You don't." I thanked him anyway. He only said one final sentence: "Don't come looking for Ashwood again." The drive back to the highway took less than 40 minutes, half the time it had taken the day before. When I reached the gas station where my trip had begun, the same cashier looked up from behind the counter. "You found it." I did. He slowly nodded. "How many houses?" 25. His smile disappeared. There were 26. I laughed nervously. "No, I counted." "So did I." He pointed toward my camera. "Look again." I opened the photographs on the small screen. The first image showed the welcome sign. The second, Holloway's Market. The third, the entire street. 26 houses, not 25. One stood between numbers 18 and 20, a white two-story home with a wraparound porch. I had no memory of seeing it, no memory of photographing it, yet there it was, perfectly clear. As I zoomed in, my blood ran cold. Someone stood in the upstairs window, watching me. It wasn't David. It wasn't anyone I had seen in town. It was me, wearing the same jacket, holding the same camera, staring down from the window with an expression I couldn't recognize. When I looked up from the camera, the gas station cashier was no longer smiling. He was staring at the photograph. "I've seen that house before." "You've been there?" He shook his head. "No." Then he quietly added, "My brother disappeared there in 1987. I drove straight home and never returned. Within days, I tried to find Ashwood again. It wasn't on any map. County records listed no town by that name. Historical archives mentioned only an abandoned farming community that had burned down in 1936. According to every official record, Ashwood had not existed for over 80 years. I kept only one photograph, the one showing the mysterious 26th house. Every September, I take it out of the envelope where it's hidden. Every year, something changes. A curtain moves, a porch light turns on, a window opens, and last September, the figure standing upstairs wasn't looking out anymore. It was standing on the front porch, waiting, as if it finally knew where I live.